Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my podcast, Double A Media. My name is Albin Aliu. I'm an engineering science major at Vanderbilt. As a senior, I like to talk about like 5 things: money, freedom, power, mentality, and especially mental models that people can gain through like passion. So the reason why I wanted to like have a conversation with you, and you're like my first guest, was that I find a lot of things about you that you feel very passionate about and you have something to say. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Kelly Weild, and I am a junior who is studying human and organizational development now. It's a new ad for me in climate studies. I'm really interested in music as a hobby. It's a very important pastime for me. I kind of would describe myself as a jack of all trades, master of none person. I try to be competent at a lot of things, but I don't think I'm ever the best person at anything, especially at Vanderbilt when you're in a pool of people who are very intelligent and talented.
True. But
it's been amazing to be here and also make friends from different places with, crazy perspectives that I wouldn't otherwise have access to if I was still in my hometown.
Yeah, I agree with the fact that we're exposed to so many different peoples that have just a lot of things to say. And if you can pick different people and different perspectives, you can kind of build your own perspective based on that. So ultimately, your perspective becomes a condensed form of people's perspective that you're interacting like kind of even daily basis. But one thing that I've noticed that I would like to know your opinion about is emotional intelligence. I know like different people have different definitions of it, but how would you describe it and how would you say one acquires emotional intelligence?
I think emotional intelligence is kind of like this loaded term that we talk a lot about, EQ versus IQ. What's the difference? What's more useful in, various settings? It's interesting. I think a lot of it is self-awareness, because if you're aware of where you are in a situation, you're kind of, the implication of that is that you're aware of like what other people are feeling and how that affects how you're going to act somewhere. I think for me personally, it has to do with empathy and your ability to kind of pick and choose your words wisely based on your ability to perceive other people's emotions and experience in a way that's authentic to them. So kind of stepping outside of yourself.
Like a different form of feeling, because you have to step on somebody's shoes in order to really feel what they're feeling. But I personally don't think you can fully understand someone, because your emotions are something so subjective that only you can truly rationalize them and put them into perspective. What do you think?
I agree with that. I think you're only ever going to be in your head. My personal experience with that, I have a twin brother, and growing up we shared a lot. And that was a double-edged sword, because you have a person who you share all these memories with, so you can reflect on them. And I think that's a huge part of just friendships and relationships in general. But growing up, it's really difficult, especially when you're kind of like in middle school or high school, and all of these environments that are kind of difficult to navigate as you're like just experimenting with like literally friends, relationships, like drinking, all of those things for the first time. It's hard when you share so much, because in my case, it was always one person was left out, and I was hyper aware of what my brother was feeling, because like I love him and that's my family. So I think for me, I never could get into his head, but there was also always a secondary thought of, if I'm doing something, how would this make him feel? Is he included? So I think that has kind of primed me to always be hyper vigilant of other people and their emotions. for better or for worse. Because I think emotional intelligence has to do with kind of reading the room.
Yeah.
And there's a part of that is empathy, but there's a line where you kind of need to be able to separate yourself from other people to prioritize your needs. Especially like if you're talking about a kind of more competitive like work setting, or I don't know what you're getting at, but it's interesting.
Yeah. I think what I was trying mainly to focus on is also success in a way and how that is correlated with emotional intelligence. And when I think of success, sometimes I also think of knowledge and how much knowledge you have and how well can you convert that into something that can bring you success. So on the topic of knowledge, would you agree with me if I say that acquisition of knowledge could also be mutually exclusive with emotional intelligence? And the way that I would back up this claim would be that CS, which is my major, in order to understand deeply the data structure of linked lists and pointers, I'll need to spend 2 hours studying that, whereas I could spend those 2 hours attending the date party at K-SIG and interact with friends and other people. So you have to give up time where you would be able to improve your social skills and emotional intelligence to acquire that technical information, to acquire that knowledge. What do you think of that?
I think with whatever you do and however you choose to spend your time, there's always an opportunity cost, whether you're staying home and studying or spending time with friends. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive necessarily. Like, I do think you have to sacrifice one for the other in different circumstances. But I think if, like, for example, you're exceptional at...
That's new.
Yeah, that's
Sorry
me.
about that.
There might be like a set time.
Yeah, no, I'll just mute it. Try to say something.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna include paid advertisement there. It's probably gonna be Red Bull, so nothing crazy. Yeah.
But what I was trying to get at was, I think in order to be effective in any role, you have to be able to communicate. And part of that is being able to translate those technical skills where you're sort of specialized. Like, I'm not a coder, right? I don't understand computer science, but you need to be able to at least like dumb it down to me for it to be like useful to other people, and for you, I guess, to be profitable or successful. Like, I think sometimes, like, with what you're doing, it's a hard skill and you sit down at your computer and whatever you code, and that's what you'll end up getting paid to do. But I think in a lot of other disciplines, a huge part of being successful, if you're not just kind of doing that hard skill, is being able to translate your knowledge so that other people who don't possess it in spades, or like have spent 4 years and so on studying it, can feel like it's tangible to them as well.
I see.
I don't know if that made sense.
It does. And I agree with the fact that there's also different roads to go about success. It doesn't have to be necessarily the technical information of a CS part. You can also achieve that through like relationships or like depends on what you define as success, I guess. And on that line, I was just curious, and like I would want to know, how do you think about this like thinking exercise that I sometimes do? Is that like, I remember when I was 10 years old as a kid, like in Macedonia, I would think of myself, how would all be 22 years old look like, you know? And then if I had this like time travel and I was able to like go back in time and like just see my little kid, I was probably fat at that point. So I was like, I don't know, interesting, you know, interaction with my younger self. And I would probably ask him like, yo, what do you think of me? You know, just like the 22 years old. So that kind of puts into perspective of like how I think success is. Like, what would my little version make happy? What do you think if you were to meet your like 10 years old Kelly? Like, what would she react like?
Honestly, I think we're pretty similar at this stage in our lives. You know, when I was growing up, I really liked writing. I really liked music, and I always said I wanted to be a writer or a journalist. And then my brothers told me I was going to make no money and have to live in their basement. So I was like, okay, maybe I have to switch gears. But in terms of my passions, I think they are, and my skill set, I think I'm a good communicator. And so that theme has,
Prevailed.
persisted through, my adolescence and young adult life. But, I think a big thing for me that was hard to overcome when I was younger was confidence, particularly in an academic setting, and feeling that I was capable and intelligent. And so if I think to myself, like, when there was one kid in elementary school, and it's always like that one moment that sticks with you. This kid, Frank. He was
Bad
like,
name.
I was in math class and it was 6th grade and I'd gotten a C, and this was on the precipice of when we were going to differentiate into higher math or regular math, and you didn't want to be in regular math. At my school, it wasn't cool to be like one of the dumb kids.
Yeah.
So I had my 70 in my math class, and I was really bad at mad minutes, and I was hiding it. And Frank said that something behind my back. He didn't think I was there, but he made a comment about how I was dumb.
Yeah.
And so after that, I was like, I'm going to fake it till I make it. And then suddenly I started doing better when like things coincidentally got harder with math. And then I started to believe it, that I was actually smart. And yeah, so I think my younger self would be proud, but I haven't had these crazy, I guess, expectations for myself. I used to be a massive perfectionist when I was little. Now I don't. I kind of let things roll off me.
Interesting.
And that was because I would we'd have an elementary school project, and we'd have to draw. We had to do these short stories, like children's books, and I am not an artist, and I threw out 5 different covers I made, even though I wasn't getting graded on my artwork. And I would cry, and my parents would be like, what the fuck is wrong with her? And I don't know when the switch flipped, but I kind of if I get a 70 on a test or a 60 or whatever, I'm just okay, whatever, next test I'll do better. And I think one thing that's helped me is I'm just nothing that I do or don't do for the most part is going to kill me.
Yeah.
And I'm 20 years old. I think we're in a very highly competitive setting, and it's great because we all push ourselves to do better. But also, if it's at the expense of kind of self-worth, then it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So I just think that aspect of myself, the kind of way I feel like I let things roll off of me now, would be a huge surprise to a younger me who is really neurotic.
I see. And it's interesting because people like Frank will always exist.
Yeah, they will.
There's so many of them in any class, in any setting, even in Macedonia. There would be a bunch of
there
Franks.
were Franks.
I swear.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, I realized about this thing where other people's opinions can affect your kind of mental health or your opinion or perception. I realized that you have certain amount of power with you. When you decide to have other people's into consideration, you give power to them in the expense of what you get returned from them. So for example, if your mom is about to give you an advice of how you should live your life, you give power to her because you value her opinion. And what is the expense of that is that once you have that knowledge of your mom, you're going to check whether that's working well for you or not. Yeah. So by having people like Frank have a mental space in our head, we kind of give a power to an enemy or a power to somebody that we would not necessarily want to have power. And that's a framework that I usually ask myself, that is this person really the person that I would want him to have power? And that's why it's also you're going to see throughout this podcast is a conversation about freedom, power, and then how do you leverage that and how do you distribute that with people?
I think to kind of summarize what you're saying is one thing I talk about when I'm just giving advice to my friends is don't care about people that don't care about you.
Yeah.
It's and that's really hard to learn, especially when we're so inclined to want people to like us. It's kind of like runs against the grain of what, you know, we want or what our like literal bodies are telling us to do. But it's something that it's something I've had to develop, which I would like literally call a backbone. I'm kind of a yes person and a people pleaser by nature. And that's exhausting. And I saw this meme on TikTok, and it was like people pleasers when they hear like she was really nice at their funeral. And I was like, holy shit, like yes, and laughed. But I was like, that's, you know, you got to get over it at a certain point. And yeah, so I try to remind myself if, you know, if this person doesn't have my best interest at heart, I shouldn't invest so much of my mental energy,
resources and
and
time
resources
and all that
into that relationship.
But then again, the question becomes, how do you define a person who has your interest at their best? Like, what are metrics or ways that you can, you know, assess somebody, whether he's someone or he or she's someone that wants your best?
You know, I think it's a really, it sounds like a very like deep question, but I think the thing that's never failed me is just my intuition. And when you leave hanging out with someone, you just have to ask,
you can tell,
like, did this person make me feel good about myself? And it's not like they made you feel good about themselves because they're like, oh my God, you're the best person ever, blowing smoke up your ass. That's not how it works. But, you know, like, just kind of listening to that voice and taking mental inventory when you're in a certain space with people and being like, did I leave this experience feeling like better or worse or neutral? And when I don't know, like just kind of being it comes back to self-awareness, but just honoring that kind of instinctual gut reaction, I think always serves you.
Do you think we're born with intuition or we build it through our life?
I don't know, obviously. I mean,
there's no right answer.
There's no right answer, yeah. But I think there are certain things we're primed to kind of turn away from or run towards. And part of that has to do with bias. And so sometimes it's really great to listen to our intuition, but other times it's really important to kind of sit and experience that discomfort if it's meeting new people and ask, like, why does this kind of make me itch? And sometimes it's not. I think, you know, when you're in a situation where you're like, this is openly bad for me, and also versus a situation where you're like, I'm out of place, but maybe that's because I'm being challenged or feeling like I'm being challenged. And I really believe that sometimes it's kind of this idea of happiness where there's this idea of like one definition just being a state of pleasure, and the other definition is human flourishing. And human flourishing is kind of rooted in this idea of personal growth, purpose, and fulfillment. And I think that only comes when you sit in that discomfort, like, and it could be just working out. And like you're in pain for like that short amount of time, but then you get through it, and then
you become stronger so that you can face bigger challenges.
And it's like it's an analogy that's, you know, as old as time, but it's really true, and I've found that a lot in my experience. And so I honestly don't even remember what the initial question was.
Yeah, we're just talking about intuition, and then we kind of like spawned into, I guess, other consciousness and like happiness. And it's one thing that I sometimes wonder about is that I keep overthinking things that are like not necessarily the deepest conversations, but definitely have some thought behind it. And then I ask myself the question, what is the practical use of this information or this like thought process? So I guess like an interesting viewpoint from you would be, at what point do you tell yourself like, yo, just stop and do what? It was like similar to like the interaction that we have with Abdullah the other night when we were just like talking about this whole debate of legacy and like happiness, and then Abdullah just came and he was like, yo, what are you guys doing? It's Saturday night.
It's
Come
Saturday
on.
night.
You know, like at what time do you stop those conversations and just kind of move on
and
with
just
life?
kind of live?
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a time and a place, and there are people, you know, sometimes like I think in that moment you and I were both willing to just have that deep dive, and so it happened.
Yeah.
But I think it's really fun to stay like in this zone of lofty ideas and philosophy. But at a certain point, like you just gotta live. And I think I like to think. I would consider myself a thinker, but I think when you think too much, it becomes like rumination.
It's counterintuitive too sometimes.
Yeah, like while we talk about all this stuff, you just have to also just kind of do.
Right.
So
just take the action.
Yeah, and I think one thing my dad always harps on me about is I talk a lot and I say a lot of things, and he's like, okay, now are you going to do them? And putting things, it's really easy to talk about stuff kind of,
right?
But it's much more important to show like that you care or show what you believe through your actions. So I think it's better to just like, it's good to have conversations like these so you can just almost stay grounded in what you believe and refresh that, because I think when you're always jumping from place to place, especially at our age in like a city like this, you get I get a little bit lost in whatever's going on. So I think it's like any sort of practice, like meditation, just to take some time to recenter is always useful.
True that.
But sometimes you need it in like 2 months. You need to go to fucking rehab to do it. Or like you need 30 minutes.
Bigger scale project.
Yeah. Or you need 30 minutes with a friend. But I think in essence, they're all like the same in terms of returning to what's important to you. And I think if you can find time for that, like
then you're winning
every day or every week, then you're in a good place.
Right. I agree with that. I don't want to take more of your time. I think this has been very successful. Like it was my first podcast. It's probably not the most professional one, nor
probably
the
not.
best one, but as we said, we thrive in like difficult circumstances. So I'm going to learn a lot just the way that I did this and see what's the next one. But I just want to leave this conversation with a final question and kind of see what you think of it. Like, what do you think is the biggest impact you could have in your life for other people?
I think there are two ways to kind of think about this. I think there's the type of impact where you're talking about or looking at quantity of people, like you cure cancer. That would be crazy. There's other ways you have impact that you don't even know about.
Right.
Like there are so many friends I have that have helped me in so many situations, and that has tremendously impacted me. And maybe they know, but I'm sure they don't know like the gravity of what it meant to me. And so I think it's really great to strive to do great things and to save the world and change the world. But I think if I can just be there for the people who are there for me, I'll feel fulfilled at the end of the day. Like I have aspirations in, you know, my career and what I want to do. And I know that I want to have a purpose that's bigger than myself.
Right.
And I think for me, if I am authentic in that with what I do, like kind of the rest will follow. But in terms of impact, you know, like the people who have had the greatest impact on me haven't necessarily been like
the
household
renowned,
names.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just important, like, again, to stay grounded in that. And again, I care about the people who care about me. And I just want to be like the best friend, sister, daughter I can. And and that's kind of what's important to me because I'm
Yeah.
a family person. But yeah, I would love to have like a larger. I just don't want to be selfish in what I do because I think we're fortunate to have a platform being at a school that we are to do, you know, impactful things, and you can go one of two directions with that. And I'm like very self-motivated, so you know, like there are things I want for me from my education, but I don't want to like hoard that and be completely self-serving.
I see that.
I don't know if
No, that's a great answer. I like the way that you kind of made the distinction that there's like a quantity impact where you can affect a lot of people, but there's also the quality impact where it's like, how much can I invest in this relationship and how much can this return for the other person? So I think that's a great way to like leave this conversation. And again, thank you for your time. Just for the note, like Kelly agreed for this literally like 30 minutes ago when we were like in Rand, casually met her, and she was like, yeah, let's just do it. I'm ready. Which is like a trait that I think a lot of people are missing, like just being spontaneous, being ready to do it. And yeah, I appreciate that. So again, thank you. And we'll see how it goes.